I seen that on your trip to Chicago, you stopped by the Oriental Institute.
That's right.
Museum in Chicago. And you went and took a look at the Qustul incense burner.
Qustul incense burner.
So, and going to take a look at it, I know that our dear brother Jabari.
Shout out to him.
Yeah, shout out to our brother Jabari. He also's been going out there. I don't know if he made several trips out there, but I know he goes to different museums.
That's right.
But I remember him doing a video about this particular incense burner, the Qustul incense burner. Is there anything that, when you went out there, that you, and doing your research on the Qustul, the actual Qustul burner, something that you discovered that maybe our brother Jabari might have left out? Because, I mean, he's like a foe in the sense of you guys do a lot of mental sparring. You guys always have debates, but
it's the thriller in Manila when we get in the room.
Right, but you learn a lot from your opponent, and he has a lot to offer, I believe, for the community.
Yeah.
But was there something that you learned that maybe Brother Jabari didn't bring forward in his video that you saw when you went out there?
Well, absolutely. It was the main idea of me going to the Chicago Oriental Institute, or the Oriental Institute of Chicago, and which actually sits on the university grounds, by the way. Something that I didn't know. I just thought that the museum was just randomly placed somewhere in the city of Chicago, but it's actually on the university grounds, so that the Oriental Institute of Chicago is actually part of the University of Chicago. So while I was on the campus grounds, I met and spoke with a lot of the kids, some of the incoming freshmen, as well as some of the sophomores that were there and some of the juniors. And it was an amazing experience. As I went inside of the Oriental Institute of Chicago, the first thing that I noticed was that they had a huge plaque on the wall. This plaque was so huge that you'd only have to be blind not to notice or see it. I remember having a dialogue with our brother priest Jabari about the genesis of language and where does language begin and what languages are some of the oldest languages in the world. But in particular, we argued, debated, and confronted one another on whether or not the language of Sumer and its cuneiform system is older or younger than the Medu Neter, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet or Egypt. And Brother Jabari, like many people who follow Kemetic spirituality, believes that the Medu Neter and the hieroglyphs represent the oldest representation of writing in the world. Well, Brother Jabari also made a statement that is going to give what I'm saying right now a lot of credence. Brother Jabari says that when we look at the Oriental Institute of Chicago, when you examine and assess some of the items on display, you must understand that what you're looking at is an academic look on history. So as you enter the Oriental Institute, you actually are entering an academic hall. All right, where you're actually being able to, because I mean, just because something is in a museum doesn't mean that which is represented is accurate and true. But according to Jabari's assessment, the Oriental Institute of Chicago is akin to walking into a trusted and verified academic hall. And in one of their largest plaques, it says right on the wall, "We are in the Oriental Institute of Chicago. This is the place where Priest Jabari says we can get an academic look at history." Well, when we look at history academically at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, it says Mesopotamia, the origins of writing. Game over. Cuneiform, Sumer, the oldest known language in the world.
No, it didn't.
Let me say it again. Right on their wall.
But I thought the Medu Neter.
I thought that's what he believed too. And I thought that his beliefs are embedded in his scholarly laboring, that his belief comes from that which he has labored in scholarly speaking.
Right.
So he's not just a person that he reads books. Much respect where respect is due. Brother Jabari actually goes out and he does field work. He's done dozens of trips to Kemet. Right. Not just by himself, but he's led entire families, groups, and people to Kemet.
Right.
Well documented. And you must give him credit for that. I give him credit for that. We must give him credit for that. You know, differences aside, that's a beautiful thing. This is African history nonetheless.
So basically what you're saying is that what you've been saying all along, it's been right?
Well, the museum confirmed that what I'm saying is right, and the museum confirmed that what he's saying is wrong. And according to him, when you enter the Oriental Institute of Chicago, it is akin to walking into an academic hall.
Yeah, it's like going to Columbia University.
It's like going into Columbia University.
NYU.
Of which I'm adding a stamp of approval on that by reminding people that it literally sits on university grounds. Okay. With that being said, one of the biggest plaques on the wall, one of the biggest exhibits, is the exhibit that tells you that the cuneiform system coming out of Mesopotamia, known today as Sumeria, is the oldest known written language in the world, preceding all other forms of written language. All other forms of written language, which would include the Medu Neter.
So you think you're going to get a challenge on that, or you think the video is just going to speak for itself? Because for a long time, you know, you've been hearing that, you know, Kemet is the origin of everything.
Right.
Kemet is the be all end all, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And little by little, and going on these field trips, mm-hmm. and discovering things, learning how to read mm-hmm. Medu Neter, starting with the cuneiform and all the other things that you started with. Mm-hmm. You've always said that it started from Sumer.
That's right.
So now, how do we transfer that to the Qustul Incense burning?
Well, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Let's first say that the Qustul Incense burner is an archaeological relic found in Qustul, Nubia.
Okay.
All right?
Yes.
And represented on the actual fragment are different scenes depicting what appears to be, and I place great emphasis on what appears to be, early symbols or ideas of kingship. This is derived from the belief that one of the fragments seem to be describing a king seated with a long crown on his head, which in terms of Kemetic spirituality, this would be the upper crown of Kemet, that long white crown, which is referred to in the Medu Neter as the, which one is this referred to? As the Ujat, the white crown. And then you have the Deshret, the red crown. But this is the Ujat, the white crown. The white crown is worn by the Nisut, the king. So Brother Jabari has said in countless times that Zion Lexx wouldn't know anything about the Qustul Incense burner, not unless he's watched my videos. Well, the first thing I want to say to Brother Jabari is, thank you very much for inspiring me to want to learn more about the Qustul Incense burner. This may not be knowledge to you, but I've been aware of what the Qustul Incense burner is, but you certainly sparked a fire within me to really want to investigate it on a very deep level.
An interest.
To the point, an interest for sure, to the point where I said, I'm coming to the city of Chicago. And whenever I come to the city of Chicago, that's going to be one of my first stops. And that's exactly what occurred. So this is kudos to Brother Jabari. But what happened in that moment is that what I discovered is that it confirmed everything that I said just from my observation online without having ever visited the city of Chicago, nor ever being within arm's length reach of the Qustul Incense burner. Me being in front of the burner confirmed all of my research, which stated that there is no crown on the entire burner. We are live at the Oriental Institute in Chicago. We're looking at the Qustul Incense burner of Nubia. One of the things that we notice is the very point of kingship, which would be the crown, is that which is not on display. So we have to ask a question. The one thing that gives the Qustul Incense burner the idea that it represents the origin of Pharaonic kingship would be the idea that there's supposed to be a crown, as you can see in this picture. A crown, a seated Nisut with a crown. Family, I ask you, where's the crown? Why doesn't the museum display the most important part of the incense burner? I'll tell you why. Because as I proved in my other videos, it does not exist. I take my camera and I take it full circle around the entire Qustul Incense burner.
Make sure you send me that video.
I gotta send you the video so that people can see. Nowhere on that Qustul Incense burner is a pharaoh seated with a white crown upon his head. Period. This is all conjecture. This is all what they call a stylized remake based on what we believe it may have looked like. You see, the Qustul Incense burner.
So what the brother showed us was a remake?
Right. So most, if not all of the pictures online of the Qustul Incense burner is a 3D imaged remake of what it is believed to have looked like before it was fragmented. If you're really paying attention to that language, you'll understand why there's so much confusion, ignorance, and even possibly lies in place within those statements. Because you watch the National Geographic, I watch it, many of us watch it. A lot of times they go in places of Africa and they do remakes of African bodies and they give them European makeovers.
Right.
Those are not Europeans, those are Africans. Those are black men and women.
Right.
So when we go into this area, this vague, dark area of remaking an image based on what we believe it should look like, in the realm of academia, this is called subjective scholarship, where one takes their own ideas and plants or injects them into the image in order to portray the idea that they wish to see. That's not how we do scholarship, though, unfortunately. Scholarship is approached objectively. So in looking at the Qustul Incense burner objectively, there is no crown on the entire burner, period. Therefore, the Qustul Incense burner cannot be the oldest representation of the earliest sign symbol of Pharaonic kingship in Egypt or Kemet, because there's no crown there whatsoever. And this is the main feature which gives the Qustul Incense burner the idea that it represents early Pharaonic kingship beginning in Nubia. Right. Because it is stated by many Afrocentrists that Kemet's kingship began in Nubia because Nubia is the mother of Egypt. Right. Although many of them won't tell you that the Egyptians depicted the Nubians as their slaves. In fact, the term Nub in the Medu Neter means gold. And the Nubians, so-called, never called themselves Nubians. Their ancestral name is Cush. And that's even referred to in the Medu Neter. They also know and acknowledge in the Medu Neter, in the culture of ancient Kemet, that there are a people represented there known as Cush. They renamed them Nub because the Nubians, as slaves to the ancient Kemites, brought tribute of gold to them annually. And there are several scenes throughout Pharaonic history that depicts Nubians coming into ancient Kemet with their arms open with gold in hand paying tribute. So the term Nubia is not even a term of endearment. It's a term indicative of Kemetic exploitation of Nubian resource, gold. So that if a so-called Nubian was alive today, they wouldn't like that terminology. Right. Because that terminology is indicative of the idea that they were exploited in Kemet. So yes, it would be a derogatory term, in fact. Another term that is referred to, that is used to refer to the people of Kush, is Taseti, which is the land of the bow. This is another term of exploitation as well, because, thank you, there's another term of exploitation as well, because the ancient Kushites were given this title by the ancient Kemeti-U because of the fact that they were mercenaries and they were amazing with their arrows, amazing with their weapons of war, their archery. The ancient Kushites were amazing archers. They were used as mercenaries by many neighboring nations and many even afar nations in ancient times in antiquity. So the people of Kemet came to call them Ta-Seti, Ta meaning land, and Seti in the Medu Neter meaning bow. Again, this is not a term of endearment. This is a term indicative of another way that they were exploited. Because all while the ancient Egyptians are enslaving the people of Kush that they call Nubians, they're also using them as mercenaries in their war. So they're fighting your wars as mercenaries. They're bringing gold to you in the form of tribute, and you're also celebrating them as your slaves. Because in several Egyptian scenes, you find something called the 9 bows. The 9 bows represents a traditional outlook on all of the traditional enemies of ancient Kemet. One of the 9 bows is ancient Nubia, ancient Kush, or Ta-Seti, all the same people. And in one particular depiction of the 9 bows, it's a sandal. And the Nisut, or the king in ancient Kemet, actually places his foot upon his enemies, so that everywhere he's walked, he is literally doing what? Trampling upon his enemies. One of his enemies symbolism that is symbolized and depicted on his sandals are Nubians, Kushites, the people of Ta-Seti. So at some point, we have to stop playing romanticism and teach truth the way it's supposed to be taught. At some point, truth has to be free. So at some point, we have to come out and do objective research, textual criticism, and just get to the scene of the crime. And that's one of the main reasons I said I want to go to the Oriental Institute of Chicago.
I want to examine.
And I surely follow through on that saying. I made it a reality.
So would you wish to sit down with Brother Jabari again and discuss your findings? You know, maybe not in a contentious setting, but right, to do some critical,
absolutely,
some critical, how would you say it, analyzation.
Absolutely. In fact, to touch on your point, I'll say this: if I have a challenge for Brother Jabari, of which I have many, but the challenge that I'm electing to bring up in this moment is, I challenge Brother Jabari to pick a museum of his choice, either here in New York City or in Chicago. Let's go to the Metropolitan Museum, or let's go to the Oriental Institute of Chicago. And instead of debating one another with PowerPoints, let's let the evidence as displayed in the museums debate themselves. So let's allow the historical evidences that are literally before us as we are literally walking through the museum to be the final thought on all points of contention.
I mean, generally speaking, when we go to museums, there's a far greater exhibit of Kemetic relics or artifacts, right? What are you challenging? What is the challenge of going with him to a museum and letting the artifacts speak for themselves? What are you trying to prove? What is the reason for you doing that?
Well, the reason should be, which I've always endeavored and elected to make this very audible, the advancement of black history and culture. This is greater than our silly contention with one another about different points of knowledge. When we elect to stand before major platforms and speak on things that we may contentiously disagree upon, the ultimate aim should still be to advance the culture of our people. Now, we may disagree on who our people are, but our work is supposed to show and prove that which we represent. So, I've always said, rather than argue with someone online, let's not face each other in person. And while being in person, let's not take it a step further, let's go to the museums together. I lead museums tours now. Brother Jabari leads museum tours now. Why not take a group of your students and I'll take a group of my students and we come together in either museum? We could go to the Metropolitan Museum or we could go to the Chicago Institute, the Oriental Institute of Chicago. Let's let the artifacts as represented in the museum speak for themselves. And yes, I'm very well aware that Israel doesn't have that many artifacts. But a thing that so many people forget is that Israel's history does not begin in Israel. Israel's history begins with our ancestor, Father Abraham, who lived in Mesopotamia in a region known as Sumer. And as vast as the archaeological relics are in Kemet, its only rival is that of Sumer, of which Sumer is her rival, because Sumer has just as much, if not more. And when we talk about literary evidence, no one has more literary evidence than ancient Sumer.
Oh, there's some that would challenge. You know, there's some people in the unconscious community that say Zion Lexx is always speaking about Sumer. He's speaking about Abraham coming from Ur of the Chaldees. They weren't even people of color. What do you have to say about that? Have you heard that before?
I've heard some people in the community make those statements. Right. When you follow the trail, it's always an ignorant source. It's always a source not sourced in academia. It's always a source not sourced in scholarship. For instance, I've had people come in the community and literally appear out of thin air, out of nowhere. No one knows them. And within, a month, 2 months, 3 months, they're now the top scholars in the community in their own eyes because of their work in the community on YouTube. And these same people will tell you that your book is not credible. You're not citing sources in your book. Your book is not accurate. I just want to say to people who have those thoughts and ideas, in the words of my dear brother Asar Imhotep, respect to you, you do know that scholars debate subjects in book form, so that when a scholar wishes to present an idea which is converse or even adverse to other ideas that are out there, rather than simply doing lectures at various academic halls around the world, the main thing that scholars look to do is to publish their works. Because contrary to popular opinion, debates on a microphone look good, but the real debate is in that which we publish on paper. Because that which you say on the microphone, you could say, I didn't have all the facts that day. I didn't have all my work that day. But when you're putting together a book, you have no excuse.
Right.
Because before you send that book out as the final edit, you're supposed to look over it a couple times.
That's right.
But when you're speaking live, yes, you're prone to make mistakes. So what scholars do is they submit their converse ideas in published form. So what I say to people who critique the books of others, critique the works of others, publish something so we can critique you as well.
Right.
So that we can even begin to actually have a dialogue steeped and immersed in academic research. Because at this point and at this level of my research, I'm no longer interested or I no longer have a desire to engage anyone on topics of contention who don't even have published works on the topic. If you have a published work on the topic, I'm willing and able to engage you. If you have no published work on the topic, see me when you get your weight up.